Rain poured heavily over New York City, painting the night in dark shades of black and gray. Cars rushed by, not paying any attention to the man standing alone at the edge of the bridge. Daniel Mercer, once a powerful name in business meetings and on magazine covers, now looked like a shadow of himself, soaked in his expensive coat. His wife had died from an illness even his wealth couldn't fix. The empire he worked so hard to build was falling apart. Investors were leaving, deals were collapsing. But all of that hurt less than coming home to silence. Daniel held on to the cold metal railing, staring down at the rough water below. The city's noise surrounded him, but he couldn't hear any of it. He had spent years chasing success, thinking it would protect him from pain. But now, wet and broken, he saw how empty it all really was. He had money, but no one to spend it with. Power, but no peace. His mind was full of regrets. People he had pushed away, missed holidays, and the apologies he never gave. It all brought him to this bridge, this rain, this deep and crushing loneliness. For the first time, Daniel didn't want to go back. Not to his penthouse, not to the meetings, not to the empty praise. He leaned forward just a little, not ready to jump, but thinking about it. He believed no one would care if he disappeared. But someone was watching. In the shadows, a small figure waited. As thunder cracked through the sky, Daniel leaned further, his hands gripping the cold rail. The rain blurred the city and his thoughts. This felt like the edge, where the pain might finally stop. But just as he began to lean in, a small voice broke through the storm. "Don't be afraid, I'll save you." Daniel froze. He turned, shocked to see a little boy standing nearby. The child was barefoot, soaked through, with wet hair stuck to his face and clothes clinging to his small body. His big eyes stared at Daniel with a depth far beyond his years. "You look just like my dad," the boy said softly, reaching up and gently tugging Daniel's coat. "I couldn't save him, but I can save you." For a moment, time seemed to pause. The wind screamed, but Daniel couldn't feel it anymore. He stared at the boy's pale, gentle face, so young, yet filled with sorrow. What are you doing out here?" Daniel asked, his voice shaky. The boy shrugged, his teeth chattering. "Sometimes I come here to talk to him. I miss him." Something broke open inside Daniel. No friend, no family member had tried to stop him. But this child, a complete stranger, had noticed his pain and cared enough to say something. Daniel dropped to his knees, not from fear, but from the boy's simple act of kindness. In a world that had gone cold, the smallest voice had reached into his darkness and shown him light. He knelt on the wet concrete, his heart pounding, the rain mixing with tears he hadn't noticed. The boy stood beside him, small hands tucked under his arms to stay warm, eyes still locked on Daniel, like he mattered. No one had looked at him like that in years, not since his wife died, not since the world decided his worth was only in headlines and money. And now this child, shivering and alone, had called him worth saving. Daniel swallowed hard. "Where's your mom?" he asked gently. The boy looked down. "Don't know. She left after Dad died. Said she couldn't handle it anymore. I sleep in a shelter when there's space. But sometimes I come here, just in case he comes back." Daniel's breath caught. A car crash. A winter. Being alone. The words were too familiar. They pulled memories from deep inside. His own childhood, the nights of barely getting by, watching his mother cry over unpaid bills. He had buried all that pain under years of chasing success, and now it was back, raw and real, spoken through a boy who reminded him of who he used to be. "You shouldn't be out here alone," Daniel said quietly. The boy gave a small shrug. "I'm used to it. But I saw you, and you looked sad, like my dad before he gave up." Daniel froze. That simple, honest sentence hit harder than any speech he'd ever heard in a boardroom. For the first time in years, something inside him stirred. Empathy. maybe even a sense of purpose. Still on his knees, soaked to the bone, Daniel felt more grounded than he had in days. The boy sat beside him on the cold concrete, pulling his knees to his chest. His voice was quiet but steady as he spoke. He talked about life on the streets, the cold nights, the hunger, the fear. But more than that, he talked about small acts of kindness. An old woman who saw his bare feet and gave him warm socks from her own bag. A delivery driver who noticed him digging through a trash can and handed him a sandwich without a word. A librarian who let him stay in the warm reading room longer than the rules allowed. "They didn't have much," the boy said, staring out at the lights across the water. "But they gave what they could. That's why I'm still here." Daniel listened. His eyes stung, not from the rain, but from the truth sinking in. He thought of all the money sitting in his bank accounts, of the people he had walked past, the meetings he'd put ahead of real moments, all the times he could have helped but didn't. "You've had nothing," Daniel said softly, "and you still gave me hope." The boy looked up, confused. Daniel reached out and took the boy's small, cold hand in his own. "I think it's time I gave something back," he whispered. In that moment, surrounded by the storm, Daniel's heart opened, not for power, not for deals, but for something far more real, humanity. 1 year later. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of a busy community center, filled with laughter and life. News cameras rolled as a local reporter stood next to a familiar face, Daniel Mercer. But today, there was no suit, no boardroom, no spotlight, just a quiet pride in his eyes. Behind him, a banner read, "Mercer Foundation for Homeless Youth." Children painted, played, and studied at tables lined with volunteers. And right beside Daniel stood the boy, now clean, healthy, and wearing a crisp school uniform. His name was Ethan. He grinned wide for the camera, holding Daniel's hand tightly. The reporter spoke warmly. "Once a Wall Street powerhouse, Daniel Mercer now dedicates his life to helping kids in need. He says it all started with one encounter on a stormy night, a little boy who changed everything." Daniel looked down at Ethan, his voice calm but full of feeling. "He saved me long before I ever helped him." The screen faded to a still image, Daniel and Ethan walking away from the camera, hand in hand into the sunlight. A voiceover played softly. "Sometimes it takes the smallest voice to remind us how big our hearts can be, and sometimes saving someone else saves you too." And in that final frame, a man who had once been lost and a boy who had once been alone walked forward into a future they never imagined, together.